The bioluminescent jungle of Exelon 3 pulsed with a rhythm that reminded Albert Holt of a heartbeat. 6 years into his interstellar medical expedition, he had grown accustomed to the humid, metallic-scented air that clung to his skin like an invisible film. Each step he took along the spongy, violet undergrowth released microscopic spores that spiraled upward in lazy, glittering eddies. Albert adjusted his scanner pack, feeling its familiar weight against his lower back. The Interstellar Medical Corps had classified him as a botanical response specialist, a title that felt simultaneously too grandiose and woefully inadequate for what he actually did. In the simplest terms, he wandered alien worlds in search of plants that could heal. Sometimes he succeeded. Often, he failed. Reading anomalous enzyme clusters. Sector 12, he murmured into his wrist recorder. Consistent with previous findings on the northern plateau. Potential pharmaceutical applications unknown. The vines overhead pulsed again, their blue-green glow intensifying momentarily before subsiding. Dewdrops caught the light, glinting like tears on the broad leaves that canopied the forest floor. The entire planet seemed to hum, not merely with the sounds of its fauna, but as if Exelon 3 itself were a vast, living organism. Albert paused to recalibrate his scanner. 6 years in deep space, and the vastness of it all still occasionally struck him with the force of a physical blow. Here he was, a human from Earth, standing on soil millions of light years from the sun that had warmed his childhood. The thought made him feel far too small in a universe too vast, a mote of dust pretending significance. He shook the feeling away. Self-doubt was a luxury he couldn't afford on expedition. The Corps needed results, not philosophical musings. His last 3 sample collections had yielded promising anti-inflammatory compounds, enough to justify the expense of keeping him out here. But Albert knew the unspoken truth. Every botanical specialist was expendable when results flagged. The jungle canopy thinned as he approached a clearing. Albert quickened his pace, eager to catalog the sunlight-loving species that would thrive in this break from shadow. His scanner chirped with increased activity. That's when he heard it. A sound that didn't belong to this alien ecology. A whimper, soft and pained, carried on the humid air. Albert froze. The IMC protocols were clear. Minimal interference with sentient species, unless medical assistance was explicitly requested. First contact scenarios were delicate. Cultural contamination could doom entire civilizations. But this sound, it carried universal pain. He moved toward it cautiously, scanner forgotten at his side. The clearing opened to reveal what appeared to be the remnants of a crash. Not a spacecraft as humans would build one, but something organic, yet clearly manufactured, like a massive seed pod split open upon impact. Scorch marks scarred the violet earth around it. Another whimper, louder now. "Hello," Albert called, instantly regretting breaking protocol. "I'm a medical specialist. I can help if you're injured." Something moved in the shadows of the broken vessel. A figure emerged, tall, slender, with skin the color of burnished copper that seemed to shimmer with an inner light. Humanoid, but distinctly alien. 4-fingered hands, large eyes with vertical pupils that contracted in the sunlight, and a crown of what appeared to be sensory tendrils, where hair might be on a human. The alien was female, or at least presented in a way Albert's human brain categorized as such. In her arms, she carried a smaller being, a child, limp and struggling for breath. "Please," she said in heavily accented standard English, "my child dies." Albert's training kicked in. He approached slowly, hands visible. "I'm Albert Holt, Botanical Response Specialist with the Interstellar Medical Corps. What happened?" The alien mother clutched her child tighter. "Aaron breathed the yellow spores. They grow in his lungs now." Her voice cracked with desperation. "Fix my child and I'll give you any pleasure you want. Human. Anything." The raw bargain startled Albert, but he understood it for what it was. a mother's desperation transcending cultural barriers. "I don't need payment," he said gently. "Let me scan him." The child, Aaron, she had called him, adopting a human name for alien vocal cords, couldn't have been more than the equivalent of 8 Earth years. His copper skin had a grayish undertone, and his breathing came in short, rattling gasps. Albert's scanner confirmed his suspicions. Fungal spores, similar to but distinct from those he'd been studying, had colonized the child's respiratory system. The infestation was aggressive, spreading rapidly through tissue that, while alien, followed biological principles familiar enough for Albert to understand the danger. "What's your name?" Albert asked the mother as he rifled through his medical pack. "Cyril," she replied, eyes never leaving her child. "Can you heal him?" Albert administered a broad-spectrum antifungal compound, knowing it was little more than a stopgap. "This will slow the spread, but he needs more specialized care. My shuttle is 2 kilometers from here. We need to move quickly." Cyril's sensory tendrils writhed with obvious distress. "I came to gather the purple root. Our healers said it would help. Our ship was damaged in the descent." "The root might help with symptoms, but not the underlying infection," Albert explained, already gathering his equipment. "Cyril, I need you to trust me. My medical facility has better equipment." Her vertical pupils dilated. "Outsiders have hunted our kind before." "I'm a healer," Albert said simply. "I swear on my life. I want only to save your son." After a moment of silent calculation, Cyril nodded. Albert lifted the boy, surprisingly light despite his size, and led the way back through the jungle. The child's breathing grew more labored with each passing minute, a countdown Albert refused to acknowledge. The emergency shuttle gleamed like a silver beacon when they reached the clearing where he'd landed it. Albert rushed inside, laying Aaron on the examination table that folded out from the wall. Cyril hesitated at the entrance, her sensory tendrils flaring with what Albert interpreted as fear. "It's safe," he assured her. "This is a medical vessel." The alien mother took a tentative step inside, then another, her eyes darting to every unfamiliar instrument and display. Albert worked quickly, attaching monitors and administering more targeted medication now that he had access to his full equipment. "The spores have adapted to his biology," Albert murmured, studying the cellular images on his screen. "Standard antifungals are barely slowing it." He turned to Cyril. "I need to know more about your species' physiology. Do you have medical records I can access?" Cyril shook her head. "Our healers keep knowledge here." She tapped her temple. "And here." She placed a hand over where Albert presumed her heart might be. "Knowledge passes from healer to apprentice." Albert frowned. Cultural differences were creating barriers at the worst possible moment. "Then, tell me everything you know about these yellow spores. Has this happened before?" "The ancient texts speak of the Yellow Death," Cyril said, her voice hushed. "It comes in cycles when the third moon aligns with the bright star. Our ancestors found healing flowers on Carrion Theta, but the journey is dangerous." Albert checked the navigation system. Carrion Theta was one of Exelon 3's moons, a 3-hour journey by shuttle. "What do these flowers look like?" Cyril's fingers traced a pattern in the air, 5-petaled with a spiral center. Albert's botanical database found no exact match, but several similar species had powerful antifungal properties. "We need to go there," Albert decided, moving to the pilot's controls. "The medications I have will keep him stable for the journey, but not much longer." Cyril placed a 4-fingered hand on his arm. "The storm belt surrounds Carrion Theta this season, and raiders patrol the outer reaches." "Raiders?" Albert asked, initiating launch sequences. "Scavengers who hunt the spaces between worlds," Cyril explained, her voice hardening. "They take what they want: resources, technology, people." Albert's jaw set with determination. "Then we'll have to be faster and smarter." He gestured to the co-pilot seat. Strap in. We're taking off. The shuttle rose through Exelon 3's dense atmosphere, the jungle canopy shrinking beneath them until it resembled a vast purple ocean. Albert kept one eye on Aaron's vitals as he navigated toward the smallest of the planet's 3 moons, a craggy, dusty satellite that grew larger in the view screen with each passing minute. Serial remained silent, her gaze alternating between her son and the approaching storm belt, a turbulent band of ion clouds and gravitational distortions that rippled with electrical discharge. The shuttle's sensors blared warnings as they approached. "I need to know exactly where on Carrion Theta these flowers grow," Albert said, plotting the most direct course through the storm belt. Serial's tendrils undulated in what might have been concentration. "The southern plateaus, where the ground glows at nightfall." Albert nodded, adjusting their trajectory. The shuttle shuddered as they entered the outer edge of the storm belt. Static electricity crawled across the view screen. "Hold on," he warned, gripping the controls tighter. "This might get rough." The shuttle bucked and rolled as gravitational eddies caught them. Albert compensated, drawing on years of deep space piloting experience. They were halfway through when the proximity alarm screeched. "Raiders!" Serial hissed, pointing to 3 fast-moving dots on the sensor display. Albert's mind raced. The shuttle wasn't built for combat, but it was agile. "I need you to monitor Aaron," he instructed. "I'm going to try to lose them in the storm." He banked hard, diving deeper into the turbulence. The raider vessels, sleek, predatory shapes with obvious weapons arrays, adjusted course to follow. "They're gaining," Serial reported, her voice tight with fear. Albert cut power momentarily, letting the shuttle drop into a gravitational well before surging forward on a new vector. One raider overshot, but the others compensated. A warning light flashed, weapons lock. "Brace!" Albert shouted as he executed a spiral maneuver. Energy pulses sizzled past the shuttle, close enough that the shields flared with absorbed radiation. He needed a strategy. The raiders had superior firepower, but perhaps not superior knowledge of the Stormbelt's dangers. Albert studied the sensor readings, looking for a massive ion surge building in the cloud ahead. "Hold tight," he warned, accelerating directly toward it. "What are you doing?" Serial cried, her tendrils writhing in alarm. "Something extremely reckless," Albert admitted, watching the raiders close in behind them. "When I say now, I need you to hit that yellow switch." The ion surge grew larger on his displays, a roiling mass of charged particles that would fry their systems if they entered it directly. But Albert had no intention of entering it. "Now!" he shouted, when they were less than a kilometer from the surge. Serial slammed the switch. Emergency thrusters fired, sending the shuttle into a vertical climb that strained the inertial dampeners to their limits. The raiders, focused on their target and not the approaching danger, flew directly into the ion surge. Lightning-like discharges engulfed their vessels. One spun out of control, its systems clearly disabled. Another managed to veer away, but clipped the third, sending both tumbling out of pursuit range. "You did it!" Serial breathed, her vertical pupils wide with astonishment. "We did it," Albert corrected, setting course for the gap in the storm belt now visible ahead. "How's Aaron?" Serial checked the monitors. His breathing grows more shallow. "We're almost there," Albert promised, pushing the shuttle to its maximum speed as they broke free of the storm belt. Carrion Theta filled the view screen now, a dusty, crater-pocked moon with thin wisps of atmosphere. Albert followed Serial's directions to the southern hemisphere, where massive plateaus rose from the barren landscape. They landed with a gentle thud on the largest plateau. Outside, the thin atmosphere necessitated breathing apparatus for Albert, though Serial assured him her species could adapt temporarily. "The flowers grow in clusters near the cliff edges," she said, as they exited the shuttle. Aaron bundled in thermal blankets in her arms. Albert donned his environmental suit and scanning equipment. The plateau's surface glittered with mineral deposits that caught the distant sun's light. True to Serial's description, the ground itself seemed to hold a faint luminescence that would likely intensify as darkness fell. They had walked less than 100 meters when Albert's scanner picked up an anomalous reading. "There's something artificial here," he said, following the signal. Buried in the dusty ground was a container of obvious, non-natural origin. A supply pod, weathered by time, but intact. Albert brushed away the dust to reveal a symbol he recognized with a jolt of surprise. "This is an IMC pod," he exclaimed. "From an expedition at least 30 years ago. Judging by the design." Serial looked confused. "Your people have been here before." "Apparently so." Albert worked the locking mechanism, which yielded with a hiss of equalizing pressure. Inside, perfectly preserved, were medical supplies, including packages labeled Oralix, experimental broad-spectrum antiviral. "This could work against the fungal infection," Albert said, excitement building. The pod also contained a holographic journal, which he activated with trembling fingers. A figure appeared, a human woman in an older version of IMC uniform. Chief Medical Officer Helena Voss, Day 127 of Expedition Hermes. The hologram began. "We've synthesized a compound from the indigenous flora that shows remarkable efficacy against pathogenic invaders. Local shamanic traditions provided the key. The lunar soil itself contains rare minerals that, when combined with the five-pointed flora, create a potent enzyme matrix." Albert looked up at Serial, who was watching the hologram with fascination. "Your healers were right about this place." The hologram continued. "The glyph sequence required for proper synthesis is recorded here." The image shifted to show a series of symbols that meant nothing to Albert. But Serial gasped. "The ancient writing," she whispered. "I recognize it from our healing temples." "Can you read it?" Albert asked urgently. Serial's tendrils waved in concentration. "It speaks of binding light to darkness, of drawing power from stone and sky." Her vertical pupils contracted with sudden understanding. "It's a formula, not just for gathering the flowers, but for activating their healing properties with the glowing dust." Albert's scientific mind raced to translate mystical concepts into practical action. "We need the flowers and the mineral-rich soil. Then, and you need to help me understand this activation process." They found the flowers growing exactly where Serial had predicted. Delicate five-petaled blooms with spiral centers, their roots embedded in glittering soil. Albert collected samples while Serial gathered the luminescent dust in a container from the shuttle. Back inside the medical bay, they worked together in a fusion of science and tradition. Albert extracted compounds from the flowers, while Serial arranged the dust in patterns described by the glyphs. When exposed to specific frequencies of light, another insight from the holographic journal, the mixture began to emit a pale blue glow. "The binding is complete," Serial murmured, her voice carrying ritual weight. Albert's scanner confirmed what seemed miraculous. The compound was restructuring itself on a molecular level, forming an enzyme mesh that, theoretically, could bind to the fungal spores and neutralize them without harming Aaron's tissue. "It's ready," Albert said, loading the serum into an injector. "But I have to warn you, this is experimental. I can't guarantee." "Do it," Serial interrupted, her copper face set with determination. "My son has no time left for doubt." Aaron's breathing had grown so faint it was barely perceptible. Albert administered the serum directly into the child's bloodstream, then activated the medical bay's advanced monitoring systems to track its progress. For several agonizing minutes, nothing happened. Albert watched the displays, willing the numbers to change, for the infection markers to decrease. Serial stood motionless, her tendrils completely still in what Albert recognized as intense focus or prayer. Then, a beep from the monitor. Aaron's oxygen levels had increased by 2%, then 3, 5. "It's working," Albert whispered, hardly daring to believe it. The fungal mass in Aaron's lungs began to break down, the spores losing coherence as the enzyme mesh disrupted their cellular structures. The boy's copper skin regained some of its luster, the grayish tinge receding. When Aaron took his first, deep, clear breath in what must have been days, Serial made a sound, unlike anything Albert had heard before. A musical trill that seemed to contain all the relief and joy of a mother seeing her child return from the brink of death. "He will live," she asked, her usually confident voice small with hope. Albert smiled, exhaustion and elation mingling as the adrenaline of the past hours began to fade. "Yes, he'll need rest and continued treatment, but the worst is over. He'll live." Serial's hand found Albert's, her 4 fingers intertwining with his 5 in a grip that conveyed what words could not. "You kept your promise, Albert Holt." "It's what I do," he replied simply. They remained on Carrion Theta until Aaron was strong enough for the journey back, allowing Albert time to study the remarkable flora and compile extensive notes on the treatment they'd pioneered. The glyphs from the ancient healing tradition, combined with IMC medical science, represented a breakthrough that could save countless lives across species barriers. Aaron recovered with the resilience of youth, soon strong enough to explore the plateau under the watchful eyes of both adults. He took to calling Albert the Starwalker in his own language, a term Serial explained was one of deep respect in their culture. When they finally returned through the storm belt, mercifully raider-free this time, to Exelon 3, Albert helped Serial repair her damaged vessel. What had begun as an emergency rescue evolved into something neither had anticipated, a genuine connection that transcended their biological differences. "Your people," Albert asked one evening, as they sat beside a fire near the repaired alien craft. "Where will you go now?" Serial's gaze lifted to the stars, visible through breaks in the jungle canopy. "We are nomads, following the ancient routes between habitable worlds. But perhaps—" Her tendrils moved in what Albert had learned to recognize as thoughtfulness. "Perhaps we could stay, for a time." "I'd like that," Albert admitted. 6 years of solitary expedition had hollowed out parts of him he hadn't realized were empty, until Serial and Aaron had filled them with purpose beyond mere scientific discovery. In the weeks that followed, they established a small settlement around the crash site. Serial's knowledge of the local ecology complemented Albert's scientific approach, and together, they cultivated a garden of both medicinal and food plants. Aaron, fully recovered, proved an eager student of both traditions, his young mind bridging the gap between Albert's analytical methods and Serial's intuitive understanding. Albert transmitted his findings to the IMC, including the breakthrough treatment they'd developed. His superiors were impressed enough to grant him extended autonomy, allowing him to remain on Exelon 3 to continue his research with his new local consultants, a bureaucratic term that hardly captured the bond forming between the 3 of them. Serial taught Albert her language, the musical tones difficult for his human vocal cords, but worth the effort to see her delight when he managed a coherent sentence. In turn, he helped her master standard English beyond the basics she'd learned through previous, more limited contact with other species. Their dwelling evolved into a fusion of their cultures, Albert's clean, functional human technology, alongside the organic curves and living materials Serial preferred. Wind chimes made from native seed pods hung from branches, their gentle tones alerting them to changes in the jungle's rhythms. Woven banners, dyed with pigments Albert had synthesized from local flora, marked the perimeter of what increasingly felt like home. One morning, Albert found Aaron sitting cross-legged outside, carefully sorting plant specimens they'd collected the previous day. "What are you doing, Aaron?" he asked, kneeling beside the boy. Aaron's vertical pupils contracted with excitement. "Making medicine, like you taught me. This one." He held up a violet leaf. "Stops pain. And this one, a twisted root. Fights fever. Albert felt a surge of pride. That's exactly right. The boy hesitated, then asked in a rush of words, "Will you be my second parent, Albert? Mother says I should ask you properly." The question caught Albert off guard. Your second parent? In our ways, when a child chooses a second parent, they become family forever, Aaron explained earnestly. Mother says you already are family in your heart, but I should honor the tradition. Emotion tightened Albert's throat. I would be honored, Aaron, truly honored. The boy's face split in a wide smile, revealing teeth that were flatter than human ones, but arranged in a familiar expression of joy. Then I can call you Baba now? It means partner of mother and teacher of life. Baba, Albert repeated, testing the word that now defined him in ways his IMC title never could. Yes, you can call me Baba. When Serial returned from gathering water, she found them working side by side, heads bent over a collection of plants as Albert explained their properties, and Aaron absorbed every word. She stood watching them, her copper face softening with an emotion that, despite their physiological differences, Albert would have recognized in any sentient being across the galaxy. Love. That night, after Aaron had fallen asleep in his woven hammock, Serial approached Albert as he recorded the day's findings in his journal. You've made my son very happy today, she said, sitting beside him. Albert set down his work. He's made me happy too. I never expected to find a family out here among the stars. Serial's tendrils moved in a pattern he had come to recognize as affectionate. When we met, I offered you any pleasure you wanted in exchange for saving my child. I never wanted payment, Albert reminded her gently. I know. Her four-fingered hand found his. But what began as a desperate bargain has become something else entirely, hasn't it? In the bioluminescent glow of the jungle night, her copper skin shimmered with inner light. Albert understood the question beneath her words. Yes, he said simply. Something I never knew I was looking for until I found it. Their kiss bridged worlds, different biologies finding common ground in shared emotion. What followed was a communion of trust as much as desire, tender exploration of similarities and differences, culminating in a union that defied the vast distances of space that had once separated them. In the months that followed, their small settlement grew into a true home. Albert continued his research. Now enriched by Serial's traditional knowledge, Aaron thrived, combining the best of both their approaches in what promised to be a unique healing gift. Other members of Serial's nomadic clan occasionally visited, some staying to learn the new medical techniques, others simply curious about the human who had become part of their extended family. Albert's scheduled check-ins with the IMC became less frequent as he negotiated a more independent role. His breakthroughs with the hybrid treatments justified the arrangement in his superiors' eyes, though they could never fully understand what he had found on Exelon 3. Not merely scientific discovery, but belonging. One evening, as they sat watching twin moons rise above the jungle canopy, Serial took Albert's hand and placed it gently on her abdomen. Do you feel it? She asked, her eyes luminous in the gathering darkness. At first, Albert felt nothing unusual. Then, a flutter, subtle but unmistakable. His eyes widened. Is that? Serial nodded, her tendrils waving with joy. A new life. Part you, part me. The healers say it is rare between our kinds, but possible. Our child will be the first of its kind. Albert's scientific mind immediately raced with questions about genetic compatibility, developmental patterns, biological implications, but his heart, the part of him that had truly come alive on this distant world, simply swelled with wonder. Our child, he repeated, voice thick with emotion. The Starwalker and the Nomad, Serial said, using their traditional designations, creating something new under alien skies. Albert gathered her in his arms, marveling at how the universe had brought him here, from solitary botanist to the center of a family that transcended species. He thought of the desperate bargain that had started it all, a mother's plea that had changed the course of 3 lives. Aaron emerged from their dwelling, rubbing sleep from his eyes. Seeing his parents embracing, he hurried over to join them. "What are you watching?" he asked, settling between them. "The future," Albert answered, one arm around Cyril and the other drawing Aaron close. "And it's beautiful." Above them, the bioluminescent canopy pulsed with the rhythm Albert had once compared to a heartbeat. But now he understood it wasn't just the planet's pulse he was feeling. It was the rhythm of belonging, of home, of family found among the stars. The desperate bargain of a mother had given Albert not pleasure, but joy, a distinction he would spend the rest of his days cherishing under alien skies that no longer felt quite so alien after all.